Guys, it's Luke here, Simbox, and this is the return of the Let's Talk Boxing podcast. This is episode 8 after our summer hiatus, and we're back with a bang. I'm joined by regular co-host Jamie. How are we doing?
I'm good, mate. I'm good. Itching to get straight back into it, mate. Like you said, a bit of a hiatus there. So, getting straight back into it, man. Having these conversations and plenty to go over as well.
Absolutely. And just for the viewers that watch the podcast on YouTube, Jamie has lost his ring light there, so it's not a silhouette of Jamie. He's actually there, and he will be sticking it with his opinions. Don't worry about that. And returning to the Let's Stop Boxing podcast is a stalwart of the podcast you remember from a couple of years back. It's Josh, originally of Josh Hart Boxing. Then he went to the big leagues with Second Out Boxing. And there he is back on Simbox. Josh, long time no see, long time no speak. How are we doing, my friend?
Not too bad, mate. Just getting back into the swing of things. It's been a very long time since I've even touched my laptop, let alone hopped on a Zoom call to talk about boxing. But starting to get the itch again to talk about it. Maybe bring back a few interviews here and there. But no, just very excited to be back. It's been a while since I've last done anything like this, so very good to be back. And as always, thank you for having me.
No problem. Josh is the hottest free agent in the game. I'm currently in deep negotiations trying to get him back on board with Simbox, so watch this space. Gentlemen, we've got a lot to go through on this podcast. We're going to look back at some of the events we missed over the summer, the boxing coming up this weekend with Dave Allen and Arslenbel Makhmudov, and we'll look back at Nate Collins' dramatic draw with Cristobal Lorente. But we're going to have to start on somewhat of a somber moment. I want to pay tribute to the late, great Ricky Hatton, a big hero of mine, a big hero of both you guys too, I'm sure, and a hero to many in Manchester and beyond. He sadly passed away a couple of weeks back, and I find it quite poignant that we return with the podcast today on what would have been Ricky's 47th birthday. And yeah, I think, I was deeply touched by his passing. I was deeply touched by the outpouring of grief and tributes that were paid to the man in the days and weeks after his passing. But Jamie, Manchester man yourself, I throw it to you. Ricky Hatton, a man of the people, a legend of the sport, and someone that will be sadly missed.
100%. The Ricky Hatton one, it was weird. I think maybe because I was from Manchester, but it just felt weird. It felt different the whole day. When the news broke, like it was genuine like grief in a way. For someone that obviously I didn't know on a personal level, it proper got to me. And to my mates as well, and obviously messing with my mates about it, and it was just a really somber moment. And I think he gave us a lot of high times, a lot of really good things to look back on, and some entertaining nights. And he was an entertaining character, and I think he was just one of us. He was just Ricky Hatton, regardless of whether he was a world champion, whether he had millions. He was still the same guy that went to the local pub, went to the local chippy, stayed true to his roots. Was a true Manchester man, and yeah, it's just shocking, and it's sad that that he's passed, and I don't know. I think it'll take a while for it to really properly sink in that he's not going to be around anymore.
Definitely, he was a huge character on the circuit, training, managing, promoting fighters. Of course, Campbell Hatton forged his own pro career, retired not too long ago. But Josh, you might not have been around for Ricky in the prime of his career, given that you're a couple of years younger than us. But just being on the circuit in terms of going to different shows and being around different fighters, different events in a media capacity, I'm sure you're fully aware and fully in tune with Ricky Hatton, and I'm sure you was a big fan of him yourself.
Oh, absolutely. Even before the media days of traveling across the country for all the various events that I covered, he's one of the first names you tend to hear when you speak about boxing and boxing in the UK. Ricky Hatton's name will come up very quickly after you start talking about it. I've obviously been as obsessed with boxing as I am. You go back and you look over the nights that he had and all the stories throughout his career, and obviously a big point as well in, I guess you could say, his later years was the battles with mental health and the way he came back from them as well. And I only ever interviewed Ricky on one occasion. It was a couple of years back now, I think, right as I just started. It was only a 5 minute interview, but for me, for me to be able to go to, my dad and my uncles and everything who know boxing and say like, "Oh, look at this! I've just interviewed Ricky Hatton." For them, that's like almost their hero in a sense. It's the fighter that they all grew up watching, and for me to almost give them that sense of happiness of me speaking to him, that's all down to Ricky and who he was. And like Jamie mentioned, he was always a man of the people. you can go back and watch all sorts, and he always has that same banter, that same humour. He was always still staying local, and yeah, not just a hero in Manchester, but a hero across Britain, and especially with the mental health battles where it does steer out of that boxing route, but other people then tend to relate to him, and him being the figure that he was. You know, people almost draw inspiration out of that, let alone whether you're into your boxing or not. And again, going back to what Jamie said as well, on that day when the news dropped that he'd passed away, I think I was on the phone to my mate and he said it first. And this is a mate of mine that's not really into boxing, so I thought he was kind of just having me on a little bit. And then you open your social media and you see one thing, you're like, okay, no, surely not. But then it just took over my feed. And even now, still looking back, because I still see tributes now when I'm just scrolling through various social medias, and it still doesn't feel quite real, especially with how active he still was in the boxing scene. And I think obviously what a lot of people knew is that he was meant to be fighting in December as well, in Dubai. And yeah, it just came as a massive shock. And British boxing won't be the same without Ricky Hatton, even though his fighting days are long gone. Um, training various fighters. Yeah, it'll be very, very sorely missed. What was a great man for British boxing.
Yeah, absolutely. I echo the sentiments from both you guys, and I think for me, it sticks in my mind with Ricky is he was the first guy that I followed as a fan of boxing, as we say, way before the days of social media and IFL and YouTube and all that kind of thing. Ricky was that guy. There wasn't social media to market him. He just built this up by word of mouth in pubs, in chippies, the local markets. He was that guy. He transcended the sport. And I remember ahead of the Mayweather fight, we was a group of friends of ours. We'd planned to watch it. It was obviously at 4, 5 a.m. in the morning. We was barely 17 years old, and we didn't have a pot to piss in between us, so we was never going to buy the pay-per-view. And we're trying to get around all these different houses at, like I say, the early hours of the morning, and we all crammed into a friend's house. And I remember, seeing his face when he lost to Mayweather. He wasn't fussed for himself. He was fussed for everybody else. Everybody that had made this trip over to Las Vegas and spent the hard-earned money. You could see that he really felt almost ashamed, which was never going to be a thing. No Ricky Hatton fan that night would ever have been ashamed of Ricky putting a hell of a performance he did in every single part of his career. But that was just a measure of the man that he never really felt bad losing himself. He felt bad for everybody else, and yeah, it just feels hollow. It just feels a little bit empty. And the sad thing is, as Josh alluded to, he seems to be beating the demons and getting over. I guess you don't really ever completely beat the demons, but he seemed to be in a good place with the plans that he had coming up. He was excited for his daughters to see him box in December because they've never had that opportunity, and the ship seemed to be sailing in a good direction. And sadly, it's never come to fruition. So yeah, certainly, I think for me, he's going to be a hell of a loss to Manchester, to Britain, to the world of boxing. And a measure of the man was Manchester United fans, City fans, didn't matter what team you support. They all came behind one to be one of Ricky Hatton's army. And the day of his tragic passing, they held a moment of celebration for him at the Manchester Derby, and it was impeccably followed by both sets of fans. And that's just a small microism of the sentiment that was held towards him. And yeah, I'd just like to say, thoughts and prayers are with his family. It's a difficult time. It was tragic seeing the Campbell Hatton reaction. It was really heart-rendering. And yeah, thoughts with the family ahead of the funeral later on this week. So yeah, all thoughts of us here at Simbox with the Hatton family. Guys, as we must do, we'll move on to the boxing this weekend. We have Dave Allen, the White Rhino, taking on the big Russian Arslanbel Makhmudov in what's being billed as a 50-50. And I'm really interested and excited to get into this fight because when it was first made, I was kind of like, I don't really see where we're going here with Dave Allen. He was talking Joseph Parker and Deontay Wilder, and Makhmudov, once the most avoided, the most feared, the boogeyman of the heavyweight division, is the guy that's going to step into a sold-out Sheffield Arena to take on a rejuvenated Dave Allen. Jamie, I'll chuck it to you first. What was your first thoughts when you seen Alan Makhmudov as a headline fight in 2025?
Didn't get it. I didn't like you just said then. To me, it was just out of the blue. Didn't really make sense on the career that they were taking Dave Allen. Especially when he said he wanted to go and fight for a British title himself. So again, it didn't really make sense that he was going to go down that route. I thought he would have maybe gone to look to win a British title Because obviously that's what he's always said. He at least wants to, do anything in the pro game, at least, win a British title. But then obviously there was talks of Deontay Wilder, which again I wasn't massively keen on that fight. I think we might have spoke about it on the last podcast a few weeks back when it was first touted. Then I just don't really know what is the plan for Dave Allen because I think it's a bit of a dangerous fight for him. I think the Wilder fight was a dangerous fight for him. And I think maybe, a Jamie TKV would have been a better option. I know obviously he's signed up now, but that British level, Solomon Decreus and people like that, I thought, if the British titles for you, then I would have been happy to see one of them fights. But don't get me wrong, this could be an absolute belter because Dave Allen's there to be hit. And obviously, I think that it's going to turn into a bit of a tear up. There's going to be very little boxing technique in it. So for the average fan, I think tune in because it's going to be an absolute barnstormer. But I think at the same time, it could be dangerous for Dave Allen because he's took some heavy shots over the years.
Yeah, I think I'm in line to agree with some of the points there. Josh, with Dave, we've seen him rise up. He had the big win over Lucas Brown at the O2 Arena in London. He got the stoppage win there, and he seemed to be on an upward trajectory. And he came in to a fight with David Price, and he was really shook up in that fight. And as Jamie said, he's took a couple of beatings over the years. He's a tough, tough man. He's never really been knocked out cold. He's been stopped on his feet. He's never been dropped. Teak tough. But are we at a point here where the popularity of Dave Allen is overriding his ability, with all due respect, and that he's getting these opportunities off? Because we speak about Ricky Hatton having a passionate following, not as big as Ricky Hatton, but Dave Allen's got a good following in his own right. Is the popularity of Dave Allen overriding his ability, and that's what's getting him these big fights? Because at this point of his career, 32, 33, 34 years of age, with the career that he's got behind him, can he really be rejuvenated and reintroduced as this master boxer in shape, shredded, dangerous Dave Allen, or is it his popularity that's getting him these opportunities?
I think it is a bit of both. The popularity obviously plays a big part. I think, as we all know, boxing at the top level is a business. If you sell tickets, if you get people talking, you're going to get those opportunities that a lot of fighters probably won't. And Dave has always had that cult following, just like similar to a Derek Chisora, for example, victory or defeat. He kind of maintains that following that he had before, but at the same time, obviously, I wasn't around boxing when Dave was first on the come up. Obviously, with the Lucas Brown nights, the David Price nights, wasn't really around it then. But you hear the stories. I think probably one of the most famous ones, or one that I always go back and look on, is when he fought on the Kell Brook Errol Spencer's undercard against Leroy Thomas, I believe. And on the day of the fight, he was going around Sheffield in different pubs celebrating like he'd already won the Commonwealth title, which he hadn't done, and then ultimately lost the fight on a split decision. Whereas now he seems to be a lot more matured. I've been around Dave a lot over the last, I guess you could say, 12 months or so. Obviously not as much as what the team would have been, but enough to see that there is a change. From the first time I spoke to him before the Fraser Clark fight to where he is now, there's a real sense of focus and maturity where he does stay in the gym, he does follow his diet, and you can see that just through the Instagram pictures, whether they're edited or not. We probably don't know, but we'll find out on Friday when he gets on the scale. But he does look like he's in a much better place now. He's a lot more dedicated to the sport, and he's starting to realize the ability that he actually has now that he's got a bit more maturity about him. He didn't have that before. Um, and that's it. In terms of the matchmaking as well, I think this is a brilliant fight. I really do think this is a brilliant fight for Dave. It's that step above the British level. Obviously, I know that they were targeting that, but I believe just before they made this fight, the board ordered Fraser Clark versus Jamie TKV for the vacant title, which is why they went to look elsewhere. I know there was talks of Otto Wallin at some point as well, but I think Makhmudov's a brilliant fight, and obviously Dave explained it best. He needed someone that scares him, and Makhmudov scares him, and that's going to bring the best out of Dave. Um, and I do think this is a really winnable fight for him as well. The blueprint there. Don't get me wrong, if there wasn't the blueprint, I do think it'd be a bit of a trickier task. And you can look at Makhmudov's defeat to Ajit Kabayel, but look at the heights that Ajit Kabayel's gone to. But I think the defeat that shows Makhmudov really isn't what we thought is losing to someone like Guido Vianello
Yeah, yeah.
And no disrespect to Guido Vianello, he's a great heavyweight in his own right, but he isn't that world level heavyweight that Ajit Kabayel's gone on to be. I believe Guido lost a fairly convincing points decision earlier this year to Richard Torres. So you can see that Makhmudov, while he isn't that world level contender, he's up there. He is up there. He's that step above. And if Dave can get a decisive victory over Makhmudov, I think there's huge opportunities awaiting for him. Riyadh season, love the heavyweights. Could we see Dave Allen go back to Riyadh season, but maybe this time as the A side? We'll know by the end of Saturday night.
Absolutely, and just to pull on a couple of points in it, as both you guys know from previous episodes of Let's Stop Boxing podcast, I'll always play devil's advocate, and a couple of things that I'll raise there, and I'll chuck it out to both you guys. With Dave Allen, we're saying that we're seeing, this change, and like we say, we've seen some of the wild stories in the past with Dave. He does look focused. He does look in fantastic shape. But this Dave Allen 2.0, is it really being built on one win over Johnny Fisher and one contentious loss to Johnny Fisher? And people will gauge how good or how bad Johnny Fisher actually is because he's another fighter with a cult following that got himself opportunities off the back of being able to sell a lot of tickets. We never really found out how good Johnny Fisher is. Maybe we will when he makes his comeback from the defeat to Dave Allen. So therefore, we'll learn a lot more from Saturday night, of course we will. But leading up to it, with Arslanbek Makhmudov, if we're saying there's a blueprint there for him to be beat, we're talking about world level operators that have beat him. So we're putting Dave Allen into a bracket where he's able to replicate a world class performance, which Ajit Kabayel and Vianello put on. It's a difficult one to gauge, and it was still at this stage of Dave Allen's career yet to fully know this is a Dave Allen that's British, European, or fringe world title level. So I think there's a lot of question marks, and that for me is what makes it an intriguing fight. I still think Arslanbek Makhmudov, he punches like a train, and his gas tank is questionable to be polite. But Jamie, I'll throw it to you. Where do you stand on this? Is Dave Allen 2.0 the real deal, or are we over exaggerating the win and the competitive loss to Johnny Fisher in his most recent fights?
To be fair, for me personally, I don't. I'm not going to say it's David Allen 2.0 because we've been here before with Dave Allen. I'd like it to be because as a person, I think he's great and I think he's great for the sport and I think he's a good character and he's a man with a good heart. And I want him to do well and be successful. But we've also seen in the past where, he has sort of let himself down. You know, um, Josh touched on it earlier about how he seems to have matured more now. And I can't really say. I'd like to say that he is, but because from in the past he hasn't really gone to the next level when we thought he would do, and he has lacked motivation, he's lacked discipline. We believe that's all changed now. But alluding to, I can't say his name.
Makhmudov.
um, Makhmudov, yeah. I think there is a blueprint to beat him massively, and I think what the blueprint's going to be for the Dave Allen team is to stay out of danger for the first few rounds, and probably do what Caballel did and work the body originally when he can get his shots off to work the body originally. And it is a very much a winnable fight for Dave Allen because Dave Allen does have the ability, and we've seen that he's got the ability, but he's never had the dedication side, the mental side to stick at it and actually believe in himself. Whereas it looks like he does actually believe in his ability now, especially the way that he spoke leading up to the Fisher fight and then executed the win against Fisher. And like Josh said, then they wouldn't really take the fight if there wasn't the blueprint to beat him. And we've seen from his two losses that there is a blueprint there, and his gas tank is questionable. I don't want to sound disrespectful when I say this either, but his heart seems a bit questionable when the going gets tough as well. And obviously it sounds like you're being a bit disrespectful, but coming from listening to other people in the community and listening to other trainers that have commented in the past and watching him with my own eyes, you do see that he has a lack of heart, and that's where Dave Allen could win the fight because he's got a hell of a lot of heart.
Absolutely. There's one thing you can't question with Dave Allen is the heart. Josh, one of the things that I found interesting, I listened to, sorry, the Matchroom podcast, and I think it was recorded a few weeks back because you kind of got the gist that it wasn't, they only posted it a couple of days ago, but you could tell it wasn't recorded that day. And Dave Allen made a comment that he would much rather fight for less money for winnable fights and get that winning feeling than fight for seven figures and cash out and lose. But isn't this what he's doing now with his Arslanbek Makhmudov fight that he could have got into line for the British title, waited for the winner of Fraser Clark, Jamie TKV, which on paper you'd argue is a more winnable fight than taking on this giant Russian, that he could have took another fight at British level, took a British title fight, and then built up maybe to European and fringe world title fight. Is this him not jumping the queue into a bigger payday for a more dangerous fight, and that it might be a slight contradiction? Is this maybe going against what Dave Allen wants? And I guess the point that I'm getting to is Eddie Hearn throwing Dave Allen to the wolves again, because we've seen that happen before. He was discarded to the scrap heap. I think Eddie Hearn even said himself that he wants to see Dave Allen retire, and that was a number of years ago. Is this Dave Allen being took off a path he wants to go down a promoter's path, maybe a more marketable fight?
I don't think so, because I would argue a British title fight for Dave Allen is probably more marketable than someone like Makhmudov, who is quite frankly only known by the hardcore boxing fans. I think if you go around the average street and just ask people, oh yeah, do you know who Arslenbel Makhmudov is? 99% of the time you're going to hear the answer no.
But do you think he's
Um,
getting paid more for the Makhmudov fight than he would for a Jamie TKV British title fight? Do you think this is a bigger payday?
I'm not sure, probably. I'd say it probably is because the way they've marketed instead is if Dave Allen wins this fight, he goes on to huge things, which is true. A win over Makhmudov does propel him into that level because he'd be the third man to beat him. Um, and look at what Caballero's gone on to. Okay, Guido Vianello, probably not, but he went on to get a big opportunity to headline a top rank card, which he hadn't really had before. Um, Obviously, the difference is with Dave between those two that have already beat Makhmudov is Dave's always kind of been around and has had those breakthrough nights and hasn't capitalized on them. And I think this is going to be that night. Or it kind of is a story we've heard before. So, he's focused this time, but there is a lot more of that feeling now. And Dave, one thing I always found interesting with Dave is after the fight with Johnny Fisher, um, he said he knows his level. And when we talk about going from Johnny Fisher to Arslanbek Makhmudov, there is a huge level, but at the same time, how easy did it look for him against Johnny Fisher, especially in the second fight? While he lost all four of the first rounds, he knew exactly what he was going to do. He knew it was going to be a repeat of the first fight, and it was just going to be a bit more convincing this time, and that's exactly what he did. And ultimately, like he said, he's going to take fights that he feels are winnable. And I believe that. But Dave's a unique character and he's one of the most brutally honest people you'll meet in the sport. He's not going to go around lying for the cameras. I just don't see Dave doing that. He just believes it's a winnable fight. While it is a scary big man in front of him, it's a man that lacks boxing ability in one sense, technically isn't the best, and will be there for a fight that favours Dave, someone that's going to come to fight. If Dave was boxing an Otto Wallin, for example, another name that was mentioned, that would be a much trickier night's work, in my opinion, than Makhmudov, because Otto Wallin is a slick southpaw who can box on the back foot. Okay, yes, we've got that, quite frankly, horrendous performance against Eric Chisora to go off with Otto Wallin, but we know his level,
Mhm.
and it just would not be an appealing fight. With this, like Jamie said, it's a perfect fight for the average fan. And Dave Allen has that fan base where the average fan will tune in. Dave Allen's an entertainer, I guess you could say. And this is a fight that will entertain. It will just be a shootout. And it's a shootout where even the bookies see it as a 50-50. It started with Dave as a favourite, then it slipped into Makhmudov being a favourite. And heading into fight week, I'm pretty sure it's bang on evens now, or very, very close to that. So going back to the original point of, is this Eddie Hearn throwing Dave into the Wolves? I don't think it is. I think if you were going to throw him into the Wolves, then you would have stuck. And when those talks of Joseph Parker are around, that's a fight to throw him into the Wolves. But a Makhmudov, what does anyone gain really out of a Makhmudov win apart from Makhmudov himself? There's not a lot to gain. A Parker, yeah, there's a big payday there. There's a fighter who's at the very top of the division. There's not a lot to gain ranking wise for Dave against Makhmudov either. And that's why I think this is a fight where it's seeing, is he really at that level? Because one thing that's always been said, and I know I'm going on a tangent here, but one thing that's always been said is
You
that
love a
Dave has
tangent.
always been such a naturally talented boxer. He's always been such a naturally talented boxer and has just lacked that discipline. He's put the discipline in there now, and I think this is the fight where we will see if he really is at that level that people was saying that he was when he was first coming through and saying that he could be one of the next big heavyweights from Britain. I think while it is probably a bit too late and he won't have as many years at the top, I think if a win this weekend, I think we will see him go into the top level. And I don't even want to start discussing names that we could see him in with next because we don't know what's going to happen this weekend.
Yeah.
But I definitely don't think he's being fed to the wolves. I think Eddie Hearn really does believe that this is a new version of Dave Allen, and I'm sure we'll come on to it. But teaming up with Jamie Moore and Nigel Travis, they wouldn't take a fight where Dave's just being fed to the wolves. They're two of the most honest men in boxing. I don't think they'd let that happen. It's simple as that.
Jamie, one of the things that we keep saying here is blueprint. You know, we look at the blueprint to beat Arslan Makhmudov, but is there also a blueprint there for Dave Allen in how to win in terms of similarities between Johnny Fisher and Makhmudov that as Jamie said there, that Arslanbek Makhmudov is not necessarily the most technical fighter. He's not going to be quick on his feet. He's going to be strong, big, upright, throw a lot of power punches, and kind of defend on the front foot. He's not a fleet-footed boxer. Dave Allen dealt with Johnny Fisher and dealt with him very well in 5 rounds in the rematch. Is that in his mind that he's kind of going to do the same, but on a level higher?
Yeah, yeah, 100%. He's got. I think, and obviously teaming up with the boys there, they're going to know 100% what to do to beat I can't find that's the name, isn't it? I'm terrible me when it comes to all the Eastern European fighters, but with this fight in particular, um, the blueprint is more or less what he did with Johnny Fisher. Is just let the first 4 rounds go. He's going to know what his opponent's going to come at him with, because we've seen it in his previous fights. He's not the most technical, like Josh has alluded to and you've alluded to. He's very much he's got a bit of volume in there, but then that's what drains his gas tank. And he does hit hard, but he's not slick. He's not perfect technique with it. So he's clubbing. It's all like clubbing. And when he comes, he swings quite wide. And I think Dave Allen will see a lot of it coming. It's just whether he just lacks a little bit of concentration at a time and gets hit with a big shot that could seriously hurt him. But I think if he's totally zoned in, he's concentrated, I think what we will probably see is him not doing much for the first 4 rounds. And if he does do anything, he's probably going to throw, some jabs to the body, maybe winging some hooks to the body when he can get his offense off. And I think he'll just wait till his opponent's breathing a bit more heavier. And then I think he will then start to go to work like he did on Fisher. And I think I think he'll probably stop him. I think if it goes past 6 rounds, and the tide turns by round five, going into round five, and it turns in Dave Allen's favour, and I think it'll be a stoppage. I think he'll revert to old, and he'll give in.
Josh, I think Jamie's led us into the predictions quite well. I've got a general feeling of what you're going to go with your prediction, but yeah, hit us with it. How do you see the main event going on Saturday night?
Well, obviously, like we said earlier on, it's been a few years since I last been on the podcast, and I think a big running theme last time is that I always try to sit on the fence. There is no sitting on the fence this time. I'm extremely confident in a Dave Allen stoppage. When it comes, I'm not too sure, but again, I almost agree with Jamie. I think after six is when it really gets favourable. But the one difference that I'm going to say between Fisher and Makhmudov is that rematch with Fisher. Fisher tried to box. He tried to box on the back foot. He just tried to navigate his way around Dave and break him down. I don't think Makhmudov's going to look to box at all. I think that'll be the daftest thing, and that's why I could see this fight go inside six as well, because it's two thunderous punches. I think Makhmudov more with that raw power. Dave just has that heavy-handed ability, but mix that with the speed that we're seeing as well. Maybe the videos were sped up. We're not too sure, but we know what social media can be like. Um, I know this fight is not going to see past 8 rounds. I can't see it going past eight. It just depends on the start that Dave makes, whether it actually makes it to six. If Dave comes and tries to give it to him from the off, I really won't be shocked if it goes inside six. And which way, I'm not sure, but I'm very confident with Dave. Wouldn't be shocked if Makhmudov somehow just chins him, but I'm relatively confident in saying I think Dave Allen gets a convincing stoppage win this weekend, and what I think would really be the kickstart of a Dave Allen 2.0.
Yeah, I think for to say that we're on a three-way podcast for the first time, we're all going to be in line with our predictions. I play devil's advocate for the sake of the conversation, but I do think Dave Allen wins this fight. I've been umming and ahhing. I've got this little Arslanbek Makhmudov on my shoulder that's saying, listen, I've got this power and I can knock him out. And I think there is going to be moments, I really do. And I think there might be times where Dave Allen might go to the corner at the end of round four and round five, and Jamie's reading him the right, actually, or telling him, do you really want this? This is what we train for. Let's go to work. But I think one thing's inevitable in this fight that Arslan Makhmudov will break down. It's just inevitable. He hasn't got the gas tank. He's a huge man. He's jacked. He throws a lot of power punches, and he will break down. And if Dave Allen survives the first two, 3 rounds without getting sparks, because even though he's not been down, we've not seen him knocked out cold. Makhmudov possesses the power to knock any man out, and he punches like a kicking horse. So I think if he gets through them 3 rounds unscathed, it's Dave Allen's fight to lose, and I think he'll break him down. And again, we're all kind of in agreement here between rounds 6 and 8. Dave Allen will break him down, whether it be to the body, whether it be a ref stoppage, or a corner stoppage. I think it's going to be a Dave Allen winning inside the middle rounds. Guys, just before we move on to the undercard, I've just got an email notification. My phone's on silent, but I've seen the vibration. Breaking news as we're on the pod. Might be not breaking news as we post the podcast, but Ben Whittaker has signed a long-term deal with Matchroom. The unbeaten light heavyweight that was with Boxer has signed with Matchroom. So that's an interesting move. Jamie, are you a big fan of Ben Whittaker?
Yeah, right. Do you know, I'm a big fan of his boxing and a big fan of his ability. I didn't like the way obviously he went around the Liam Cameron fight the first time, but I think he needed that. He needed that to happen to sort of not because because after the second fight it showed he was actually humble, and he was just trying to have a bit of a character there, but. I think he's brilliant. Apart from that little blip that he had, where because at one point I was like, I didn't like the way that he was speaking about Liam Cameron and stuff, and it didn't really sit well with me. But then what happened. They had obviously the falling over the ropes. He was sort of ridiculed for a bit when didn't really say much, and then he came back and was a lot more sort of humble in the sense of like I don't want him to be humble about his ability, but more humble as in like what he had and what his opponents didn't have, and on a more of a personal level. Um, and it was great to see him obviously get the win. And I'm a big fan of him, and I think he can go on to do great things in the sport. But I think again he's one that just needs the right people around him. And I think moving over, going over to Matchroom, I think that could be a massive move for him because Eddie's good at, Eddie's good at manoeuvring careers in the right path, and Eddie will have a good team around him to, keep him level-headed because he knows he's good. He knows he's good, and I think for his own sake, I think he just needs people that are going to keep him on the right path, but still allow him to express himself as a good boxer.
Yeah, I think that's what you're right in what you're saying there, that Eddie will be the kind of guy that'll guide him correctly, but will let him express himself. Eddie loves a good character, and this, for me, Josh, seemed inevitable for a long time that Ben Whittaker and Matchroom Eddie Hearn seemed a match made in heaven, and it was just inevitable that it was going to come along. You couldn't really see, one of the news articles that we missed, the big breaking news over the summer when we weren't recording the podcast, was Box's deal coming to an end with Sky Sports. Me and Jamie was actually at the last show on Sky Sports with Callum Simpson's European title win. Ben Whittaker never really seemed like the kind of fighter that was going to box on BBC, was he? With all due respect, it's a free to wear platform. It's going to get millions of viewers, but not necessarily millions of boxing fans watching. Him on his own with Eddie, with a matchroom machine behind him, seems like a really, really big deal. And the interesting thing is with Queensbury, they've got this big light heavyweight show in Manchester coming up with Lyndon Arthur and Brad Ray and Zach Parker and Joshua Boatse. Even though they're with different promoters, the fact they're on the same platform, Ben Whittaker's got a world of options in front of him now, and it's a really interesting move. What's your thoughts, Josh?
When you said email notification, I thought this was going to be like some little way to like lead you into like getting people to subscribe and get some interactions. And then straight away from my Twitter, I was like, surely not, because I didn't expect to see this happen. I saw a few reports last week that Ben Schlom was planning a show in Birmingham in November. So you would have just assumed, oh, Ben Schlom going back to the East Midlands, or not the West Midlands, sorry. It's going to be Ben Whittaker. So to see that news is quite shocking. But like you said, Luke, inevitable. Ben Whittaker needs that team of a promoter that shows that passion. Ben Shalom's passionate for the sport, don't get me wrong, because you don't get yourself into the position he's in without the passion. But someone that just has that excitement. And when you look at the promoters, who gives that excitement, who really sells a fighter well, I don't think there's many better than Eddie Hearn across the entire sport. And it just feels like a match made in heaven, really, for those two. And I was thinking about this the other day, looking at the domestic light heavyweight scene, and outside of Callum Smith, who do Matchroom really have that is that like stalwart, you know, guaranteed excitement light heavyweight, and they don't really have that. Okay, you've got Craig Richards, but people have always been a bit unsure of him. You know, he kind of hasn't been able to break through to that next level. Queensbury have got a lot of the light heavyweights now, and I think the thing that Ben Whittaker would have wanted as well is to go somewhere where he is going to be the priority, and it's not. But you go to Queensbury and there's all these different light heavyweights that he's got to compete with, and while Ben probably believes he's better than all of them, it's trying to get that favour and make yourself known from the off that you're going to be Frank Warren's favourite, which is going to be a hard thing to do when you look at the fighters that he's got. Going to Matchroom, looking at that light heavyweight division and looking at Matchroom's light heavyweight stable, Ben Whittaker, with the profile that he's already got, he's not just going to be a priority for Matchroom at light heavyweight, but across Matchroom's UK market. You know, in a period right now where there's a lot of talk of a lack of UK headliners and a lot of almost British boxing in crisis, I guess you could say. Someone like Ben Whittaker, who, okay, while he is a bit like Marmite in terms of some people love him, some people hate him, one thing's guaranteed is that people are going to watch him. We saw with that Liam Cameron rematch, which realistically isn't, in terms of level of fight, is nothing really. Um, Over 10,000 people turned up for that night, whether that was because of Liam Cameron's amazing comeback, but also you can't ignore that profile that Ben Whittaker's got. The way he's grown his career on Sky has been brilliant. And especially looking at that move to Boxer to BBC, again, I saw some more reports the other day where it's like a four-show year, like four shows a year. Someone like Ben Whittaker isn't going to want to do that. And with him not being an Adam Azim, for example, who is starting to break into that world scene now where Turkey is taking notice and we'll have him on the shows. The one time Ben got on a Riyadh season show, he didn't impress at all, really. And Turkey's not going to want to bring him back just yet, but being with Matchroom now, he'll get that time to impress and he'll get that activity as well, which I think is something Boxer are going to struggle to deliver for their fighters now. If they're only doing four shows a year, you won't be able to get all your fighters on Riyadh season shows. So I think for Ben Whittaker, this is a perfect move and a move that excites me as well, especially with Matchroom rumored to be back in the West Midlands in November. Could we see that as the return date for Ben Whittaker? I'm sure we'll have some news very soon on his future.
Absolutely, we look forward to that with a lot of excitement. We took ourselves on a little detour there, but it was a subject we needed to get in. Ben Whittaker signs to Matchroom on a long-term deal. Let's go back to Saturday night. One fight that I do want to bring up, and I was texting um, Jamie about it last night, is the rematch between Junaid Bostan and Bilal Fawaz. And one thing that I like, similar to Ben Whittaker and Liam Cameron in a way, is when you have these rivalries brewing at the level below the world scene, the European scene. Even this is English title level. It really shows you the mettle of these guys and that they can go through adversity, get into little wars, and rediscover themselves. And I think for Junaid Bostan, Bilal Fawaz is the perfect dance partner at this point of his career. They fought in January. It was a contentious draw, but a great fight, a lot of drama. It was swinging one way, then the other. One of those fights that screamed rematch. It was put off throughout the year. I think it was more on Junaid Bostan's side. I think there was a couple of injuries there, but it's on and it's in Sheffield, Junaid Bostan's backyard pretty much. Really excited for this fight. Jamie, I'll chuck it to you first. You were quite adamant when we were talking last night that you thought Junaid Bostan lost that fight. It was scored a draw, one judge for one fighter, one for the other, and one couldn't be split. Are you still on that? 24 hours later, you've had a chance to sit on it,
Yeah.
stew on it, preview the rematch. Are you still adamant that Bilal Fawaz was victorious back in January?
Yeah. I'm still adamant. I'm still adamant he won the fight in my eyes. And I think, Boston being the big name up and coming on the Matchroom, I think is, well, I'm not saying, obviously I don't want to say corruption, but I think probably swayed in his favour for it to be a draw. But I just want to just take a moment. Like, how great is Fawaz, by the way? Like, how great, like, is he could be a Bond villain, man. I'm telling you, like the way he speaks and conducts himself in the face off, I think he's an absolute
Did you guys
character.
watch that when I sent the link? Did you watch the
Yeah, yeah,
cards on the table? When you say Bond villain, it screams Bond villain. I've never seen
yeah.
anything like it. We've seen Tyson Fury, David Hay, other fighters play the bad
Oh,
guy.
brilliant.
There's nothing like Bilal Fawaz. Josh, have you seen it?
Yeah, I've what out of all the fights on Saturday night, and I know we're going to speak about the other fights, but I am really intrigued by this rematch between Junaid and Bilal. Um, and I've just been because one thing with Junaid, I seen him back in July, at the Matchroom rebrand party that they did, and he just fell silent on social media afterwards. He posted that one thing on Instagram, and then he was nowhere to be seen. You'd barely see him at shows. You'd barely see him speaking about what's next, especially with the change of management as well. No one really quite knew what was happening. So as soon as this fight was official and seeing the build-up content that they'd done, I think it's perfect because I was there throughout the build-up for the first fight, and one thing that was constantly said as the character of Bilal Fawaz is a unique character, and I think Matchroom are going to have seen that, saw the way he was acting at the press conference in January, and go, we can really market this rematch. While it, like mentioned, it is an English title fight. I think people are forgetting that it's an English title fight. Just seeing the way that they speak to each other, and it almost seems like the belt's irrelevant now. And while it's not bad blood between the two, there's definitely a sense of they want to get a one up on each other, and a lot for Junaid to prove this weekend as well. But I think the way they've built it all up as well, and they released the day in the life videos that they did as well not long ago. And again, you can see it with Bilal. It's just weird, but it's great at the same time. Don't get me wrong. I'd feel a little bit weird if he was just staring into my eyes and whispering "run." Like it's not the most comforting thing to see, but it's brilliant. It's characters like Bilal that make the sport as great as what it is, and whether it's world title level or English title level like this weekend, characters like that just give a sense of excitement because you can see it's not just an act from Bilal as well. I do really think that is just how he is. Yeah, it's just brilliant. It makes the rematch so much more exciting because he almost makes you believe that he can do it, and he ever so nearly did do it in January. I've not actually watched the fight back since, but being there on that night, you did have to slightly lean towards Bilal. I had it a draw. I was scoring it as it was going on. I had it a 5 round split, but you can definitely. I think if you were to argue for one of them to win, I do think you kind of look more towards Bilal. Is that just because he performed a lot better than what we all thought? Was Junaid Bostan a lot worse? There's a lot of questions to be answered this weekend. There's a hell of a lot of questions, and outside of the main event, it is probably my pick for fight of the night. I'll just get it out there now.
Yeah, I think I tend to agree. And I think you know what it was for me, and Jamie, I'll swing it back round to you in a second. That when I watched the fight back, I think you get the idea that Bilal Fawaz was winning the fight or should have won the fight because the rounds he was winning, he kind of dominated. You know, there was some points in that fight where it looked like it was getting really, really tough for Junaid, and Bilal was landing heavy and freely. But of course, you can only win one round at a time. You know, if you win round four really, really strong and then you kind of scrape round five, it doesn't make a difference. Each round is scored individually. So I think it was a really close fight, but the rounds that Bilal Fawaz won, he won really, really well. And that gave the impression that he was winning the fight overall. So, Jamie, I'll swing it back round to you. Tell us in your words what you thought of the fight as you was getting onto.
So for me, with the first one, obviously I had Bilal winning the fight. Not obviously not by much, you know, 6-4. But like you said, the rounds he won were very dominant. But for me, there was just moments in the fight where Bostan boxed like someone that just didn't want to lose, as opposed to boxing that he wanted to win. Obviously, he did initially, but as it looked like the fight was getting hard, like he looked like someone that's like, oh, this is hard. This like for me anyway. I've obviously been in, getting a few fights myself. You know, there is moments where you might question yourself, like, wow, this is, and he looked to me like somebody that at times in that fight was questioning, like, well, I don't know if I ever want to be here. But then at the same time, sounds hypocritical. What I'm going to say now is he did stay in there at times when it did get tough as well, which was good to see because he needed to be tested to see if he has got the heart to stay in it. And obviously he showed that he did because at times it looked like in his facial expression and his body language that he didn't want to be there. But he kept pulling it out and he kept, he did keep trying. But I just felt Bilal was the more stronger, dominant fighter on the night and looked that throughout the fight, even though Boston had his moments and he won his rounds and it was close at times. I just think the work that Bilal did was what swung it for me. But I think you mentioned this as well, and you're right. Boston can improve a lot more on that performance as whereas I don't think Bilal can. I think he's going to fight very much the same way he did. Whereas Bostan's probably well, he is more of a technical boxer, and will probably box more and try not to get into a scrap, which is what Bilal Fawaz will want and will be more successful at.
Yeah, you've kind of encompassed what I was going to get onto there with Bilal Fawaz. That there was moments in that first fight. We say about his performance in cards on the table. He was performing in the ring, and I don't just mean boxing. There was sometimes when he was landing some big shots and standing back and kind of roaring at JD Boston, and you kind of think if he cut that out, if he had success and he jumped on him and doubled and trebled up his success, maybe he could have got Junaid out of there. And that if it was a 12 round fight as opposed to 10, I think we won't even be questioning this fight. I think Bilal Fawaz would have run away with it and maybe even got a later stoppage. This is interesting for me because if Junaid Bostan has knuckled down and as Josh said that he's come away from social media, if he really has if he's trained to win this fight and win it well, he's got the natural ability. That's clear to see. But there was a little bit in the day of the life of, I'm not sure if you boys have watched it, but he turns up to train with Grant Smith and they're debating how long he's been late, whether it was 5 or 6 minutes. Now, to me, if you're going into training for a rematch of a fight that was so contentious, so controversial against a guy that's coming to take you out, even if it's just a bit of a laugh, like Jamie, we've been around Kieran Fowler. Imagine coming into his gym 6 minutes late and debating whether it's 5 or 6 minutes, something so tedious.
Yeah,
If the fight is that important, if he's that desperate to win, that's not it's not a good sign. It might be something so small, but it's something that you get found out about when you're in the ring. It's not a good sign, is it?
yeah, no, I'd have to agree with that point. And obviously, I've not seen the clip, so but with you alluding to what was said and stuff, the fact that you're arguing about whether you were 5 or 6 minutes late, it's like mentality wise for me, look, might be wrong, but I think that's, not the mentality of I'm I want to be number one, I'm going to be the best in the world. I'm not going to be 5 minutes late, I'm going to be 5, 10, 15, an hour early and, do a little bit more work, get me stretching in or whatever. And like you said, if that was Kieran and we had gone to it, he'd be like, well, all right, go home then. You're not going to take your training serious. I'm not training you. But obviously it was like you say, probably all in good jest. But like you said, just them little things, you have to pick up on them from a mental point of view as well.
Josh, are we in unison here in thinking that if Junaid Bostan comes into this fight 100% mentally right, 100% physically right, that this is his fight to lose, that even though it was so close, so competitive the first time around, that his natural ability should see him win this fight and win this fight comfortably? Or is Bilal Fawaz just the kind of character, the kind of fighter that has got Junaid Bostan's numbers? Many fighters do have those kind of opponents where they get dragged into a fight they don't want to fight. Is this a case of Junaid Bostan knuckling down and winning the fight, or is Bilal Fawaz always going to have his number?
I think it's an interesting question there. Because I do think Junaid has all the ingredients to beat him, but the one thing we talk about Bilal's unique character, but one thing we're glossing over is that unique style that he's got as well. I remember watching that first fight and the way he fights, he had his hands like out here, the way he throws his punches just looks so unorthodox, but it works for him. And the thing that I've always been thinking since the rematch was announced is how do you actually prepare for someone with that style that is, whether how good or not good you think it is, how do you prepare for that? How do you replicate that? How do you find a sparring partner that can replicate that? And truthfully, you can't. So I think this is a fight where Junaid just needs to obviously have knuckled down, but let that natural ability shine. You know, one thing that I always think is something that fighters have a problem with is sticking to a game plan a little bit too much. I think at some points you've just got to go off your own experience. And I think Junaid's been around the sport enough. Okay, while this is only his, what, 12th pro fight, I think he's been around long enough now. He's been training for God knows how many years that he has got that experience to get himself through these tough moments. And I think those 10 rounds that he had with Bilal back in January were probably the most important 10 rounds of his career so far. You, he probably learnt more that night than what he's done in any other fight, apart from the fights where he's had to pace himself and whatnot, like the Jack Martin night in Liverpool, for example, when he won the Commonwealth. A night like that where it was a back and forth battle. It wasn't just him throwing and landing the shots. He was getting hit, he was getting tagged. And like Jamie said, at points where it looked like he could have probably gone out of there. Um, but I do think Junaid will show the levels this week, and I'm a big fan of Junaid. I've watched his career from the start to now, and seeing him in the gym and seeing some of the people that he has sparred, I do think someone like Bilal, if that is where you're slipping up, it just wouldn't make sense to me if he was to slip up against someone like Bilal. I'd like to think January was just an off night. He said he's made a lot of changes, not just in the gym and his boxing, but his life as well. He's cut a lot of people out. He's changed the way he lives his life. And it all just gives right signals that we do see a rejuvenated Junaid Bostan, and we see a Junaid Bostan hopefully go on this weekend to put on a career best performance.
Yeah, and I think at this stage of his career, that is what it's going to take because with all due respect, and I can't speak for the man, but the kind of performance from Junaid Boston that we got in January gave me the feeling that he was almost looking past the English title scene, that he was almost just another trinket to pick up on his way to bigger things, maybe the British title and beyond. He was around fighters like Mick Conlan, he's been around recently, Sonny Edwards, Dalton Smith, guys that are in and around world title level, and he was kind of maybe looking beyond the English title. Whereas with Bilal Fawaz, with the backstory that he's got, is an amazing backstory. Some of the trials and tribulations he's overcome outside of the ring, is a battle in of itself. And maybe he was looking at the English title and being on such a platform he was on against Junaid Boston. That was his world title. That was his end goal. That nothing mattered after that. And that kind of shone through in the fight that it was kind of a case of who wanted it more. So for me on Saturday, I think again, we're kind of all in unison with this. Is Junaid Boston's cut out a lot of negative energy and distractions in his personal life. He seems to have knuckled down more in the gym. I think Mick Conlan's took him under his wing from what I've seen on social media. So that's going to play a massive positive effect. A fully fit, firing, focused Junaid Bostan should box circles around Bilal Fawaz. With all due respect, Bilal is a physically imposing specimen, but I just can't get away from a niggly feeling that Bilal Fawaz just has his number, that at some point in this fight, they're going to get involved again, they're going to exchange, and then it becomes more of a 50-50 fight. So I'm going to sit on the fence for this one, boys. I'm going to say that Junaid Bostan should win if he's fully fit, fully firing, fully focused, but if he gives an inch, Bilal Fawaz will take a mile, and then it becomes a 50-50 toss-up fight, just as we got in the first round or the first time around. And Jamie, just to close out on this segment, what's your thoughts on the rematch? Where are you sitting?
I'm gonna go with Boston. I think Boston, like Josh said, his natural ability should shine through. He is levels above in terms of ability than Bilal. That's no disrespect to Bilal, but yeah, I'd just like to think he's too good for him, and it was an off night because he is a great talent, and I think maybe it was a bit of an ego check for him, and that might be just what he needed to knuckle down, and I think we might see a totally different Boston on the weekend.
Yeah, we look forward to the show in Sheffield. There's also a good fight between Josh Padlett and Reece Bellotti. Good domestic dust up there. And also the other side of the Atlantic, we've got Jerome Boots Ennis, the former welterweight unified world champion, making his 154-pound debut against Lima. Josh, was you underwhelmed with this? Did you expect him to go straight in with one of the title holders at 154 pounds, or do you see him dipping his toes in before going in at the deep end and taking on one of the title holders at 154 pounds?
I kind of gathered they would dip his toes in a bit because obviously there's talks of the Virgin Ortiz fight already signed for next year. But when you hear Eddie Hearn say, okay, he's going to be fighting in November or October, sorry, in Philadelphia, you kind of get a feeling, right, if they're going back to Philly, they're going to a place where they know he's going to sell because the times that he has fought in Philadelphia under Matchroom, it was David Avanesian and Chikadian, the rematch with him. Two fights that weren't very appealing for the fans. Ones that, let's say the fans had to travel elsewhere for it, they probably wouldn't bother. But because it's in his hometown, people turn up, people like to back their own. So you always kind of knew it wasn't going to be a name that's going to get you excited and get you out your seat. But Lima is an interesting opponent outside of that defeat to Aaron McKenna, but it was a fight that he took on, I want to say 6 days' notice, if that. Um, he has his last three fights, he's gone on the road for them and won all of them. He's the IBO world champion. He's ranked top 10 in multiple of the rankings now. So he is that good test. He is a test that may prove to be a little bit tricky for Jaron Ennis, but at this stage of Jaron Ennis's career, he's what 34 and 0 now, unified world champion at welterweight. He's one of the best talents in the sport. It's almost a fight that I find hard to talk about because there's just nothing to dig at because it's one of those fights you just look at it and you go, we know what's going to happen here. Hopefully, the only difference I hope is that it's a bit more of an exciting performance from Duran compared to his last outing in Philly. I know he fought Stanionis at Broadwalk Hall last time out, and it was a brilliant performance, but he just seemed against Shikazian, and when he's in with those names that aren't his level, he just seems to lack that engagement and that excitement and tends just to coast a bit. And I hope we don't see that. I hope he goes into this fight and looks to make that statement, and let everyone know that he is here at super welterweight and those big fights are going to be winnable for him and people will give him a chance going into them. But if a lackluster performance just won't get people excited and out of their seats this weekend for it.
Where do you sit with this, Jamie? With Jaron Boots Ennis, he's unquestionably one of the most talented fighters in the world. Is this a case of being unlucky that he's kind of come after Terence Crawford, Errol Spence Jr. at welterweight, that he's not really got the dance partners there? He's moved up to 154 pounds. The champion seems to be a little bit tied up. The Virgil Ortiz fight is being put off. He's, like I say, Josh said there, he's 34 and 0. He's not really had that breakout performance. And we're saying this as somebody that unified the titles at 147 pounds, which is universally recognized as one of the best divisions, or historically has been recognized as one of the best divisions in boxing. But he's not really had that breakout superstar moment, has he? Is this just a case of bad luck that he's not really got the timing in his career to have these other elite fighters in and around him?
I think I think it's a bit of both. I think it's a bit of bad luck in the sense that he has been around. Your old Spencers, your Crawfords, the big names in the sport that he's had to compete with. But I think a little bit, Josh actually said this before. It comes down to some lackluster performances from himself, where there's been fights where he could have really made a statement and really made a bang. And sometimes I think there's been fighters there for the stoppage for an entertaining stoppage. If he just went for it, and I think he's a bit to blame himself for not being as because when you watch him, he's excited. Like from a boxer's point of view, you're like, wow, you're incredible with the way you move. Your shot selection, your speed, but then you just you're lackluster at times and you're just coasting, like Josh said. And I think that's a big part of the problem as to why he's not had his big standout moment. And I think if he wants to have a standout moment, opponents like Lima, he's got to go in and do a demolition job on him, and he's got to get people jumping out the seats and being like, "Wow, you know, incredible." And that's what's going to get more people noticing him, because I think his other problem is, apart from a lot of the hardcore boxing fans and the Americans, he's not massively well known. I talk boxing people in work, and when they go on, name a world, well, there's not many world class fighters. Name someone, I'll go, oh, Boots Ennis, and because and they'll be like, who?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know him, so he can't be world class. And it's like that, it's stuff like that where it's like, I know he's world class, and I'm arguing with people because they don't know who he is. And that's a bit frustrating as well, because I'm kind of like, Boots, you should be well up there. And I think, yeah, if you're going to have this fight, and it's right to dip your toes into a new weight division, but go out and make a statement, let the world know that you're here now. And, Crawford's going to probably be on the way out. Canelo and all them are going to be on the way out. And it's your time, it's your time to now take over the divisions and become multiple undisputed champion across
Yeah, I
different
think
weights.
he's got the physical capabilities there. Like we say, we've already won world titles at 147 pounds. He's more than capable of winning world titles at 154, and then even potentially moving up to 160. So we look forward to hopefully an explosive performance from Jaron Boots Ennis on Saturday. Guys, let's rewind. Let's look back to Saturday just gone up in Glasgow in Scotland. A fantastic fight for a WBC final eliminator. The European title was on the line. The unbeaten Nathaniel Collins took on the fellow unbeaten Cristobal Lorente. I think going in for me, Lorente was somewhat of an unknown quantity. Nathaniel Collins, being a British fighter, we knew a little bit more about him. But sometimes these unheralded but unbeaten European level fighters, we've seen them come over and cause the upsets before now on British soil. And for me, through 6 rounds, this looked like Nathaniel Collins' fight to lose, and that he was going to stop him at any moment. And then round six for me, round of the year so far. Some of the rounds in Eubank Junior, Conor Ben might argue with that, but for me, round six of Nathaniel Collins against Laurent was round of the year. But that was it. Then from there, it seemed to be. He emptied the tank. It almost reminded me of Anthony Joshua against Vladimir Klitschko when he emptied the tank in round five, didn't get his man out of there, and then was left chasing then for the remainder of the fight. Obviously, Joshua went on to get the stoppage. Collins didn't. It ended up being a draw. And on first viewing, similar to what we're saying about Boston and Fawaz, that the strong rounds from Collins was so strong that if you had the feeling that he was winning the fight, but if you score the rounds individually, I didn't really argue with a draw by the end of 12. So, Josh, I'll chuck it to you first. Firstly, did you watch the fight? And secondly, did you agree with the fact of it being a draw?
I'm gonna have to hold my hands up here. I was at work during the entire card,
Ooh.
so I wasn't able to watch it. I was keeping up to date with it on my phone, and I was in one of these group chats I'm in. All I was seeing was take your just like, oh, take your hat off to them, boys. What a round! And I thought that was like round 12. I thought they just ended the fight with a bang, and then like half an hour later, my phone starts pinging off again saying a draw. I'm like, oh, I thought this round of the year contender was the final round. Um, from what I've been reading online, though, this is the only bit of verdict I can really give on the entire card. From what I've been reading, people are quite shocked at the draw, given I'm guessing the way the fight played out, and I'm seeing a lot of the comments kind of saying that people thought Collins won it. Some had it quite wide for Collins, some had it 115, 113 for Collins, but a lot of the people I'm seeing give their thoughts on it, saying they thought Collins won the fight, which I find quite interesting, where people think the home fighter's won and then doesn't. And I just find that interesting. But outside of that, I've not watched any of the card. I've not really had any time to catch up on the highlights. So I'm gonna have to take a back seat for this one and just hear what you boys have to say about it.
Well, in a way, I'm almost jealous that you get to go and watch it for the first time because it really is that good, that round six. But the general feel I got, I didn't score it round for round. Don't get me wrong, I was having a couple of drinks and was chilling out and was kind of watching it without really scoring the fight, which is what I prefer to. I tend to like to get a general feel for the fight. But loosely, I kind of felt one of the first six went to Lorente, the other five to Collins, and then the same on the second half of the fight. Jamie, did you watch the fight or am I going down a tangent on my own here?
No, no, I did. I watched obviously the Hutchinson and that fight, and obviously, like watching it, I thought Collins had done enough to win the
If we're
fight.
picking a winner, I'd tend
You
to
know,
side with Collins. Yeah, I think so. But
yeah,
yeah,
but obviously it was a great tear up, and I don't think some like obviously some of the comments saying that he won it wide. I don't think it was a wide win because he sort of nearly let it slip away.
yeah.
So in a way, for nearly letting it slip away, maybe the draw was the right result because you let it slip. But I thought he had just done enough, but could obviously should be a massive wake up call to him. Um, that he needs to be a bit more disciplined and level headed in there because, like you said, it looked like it was going to stop him, and sometimes you can get carried away and you do empty the gas tank before you're supposed to empty it, and a lot earlier in the fight than you should do, and that did play a bit of a factor into it. But yeah, I think overall, I think he did enough to win. But I can't really argue because he allowed it to become a draw, if that makes sense. He allowed it to go down that route where it didn't have to go down that route with the way the fight was going initially. And hats off to his opponent because it didn't look like that it was going to happen that was going to happen, and fair play because he fought his way right back into it. And I think a rematch will be. I'd love to watch the rematch again because round six was a belter.
Absolutely. That screams rematch to me. Listening to a few words Frank Warren said to an interview today, I think they might try and bypass that rematch and try and get the WBC title shot outright. I'm not sure how they're going to wrangle that, but good old Uncle Frankie, he'll have a way with words. Just a quick one on Willie Hutchinson. He stopped Mark Jeffers. Mark Jeffers coming up from 168 pounds to 175. He lost last time out. We was there for the fight, as we say, on the undercard of Callum Simpson's European title victory. Matt Jeffers, for a long time, seemed to be somewhat of a unknown quantity that he was waiting in the shadows of Callum Simpson and that he was the avoided fighter. He didn't necessarily have the financial pull, the popularity pull of Callum Simpson, and that he was biding his time. He was getting some good wins. He beat Zach Chelli. He came short against Hemphill and Barnsley. Takes this fight, which I didn't really get because I think Mark Jeffers is young enough and good enough and popular enough. He had a good crowd in Barnsley that he could have rebuilt, and he could have come again. But to jump in to a fight against a dangerous opponent in the division above, I didn't really get that kind of matchmaking. So, Jamie, I throw this back to you as we say Josh needs to catch up on the fights. But yeah, was you questioning the decision to go in with Willie Hutchinson from
Yeah,
his team?
100%. It didn't make sense to me why he would have moved up. And Well, not necessarily moving up, but why would go and take a fight with Willie Hutchinson off the back of that loss in Barnsley? It just didn't make any sense to me. And I don't know whether it's because of what's happening with Boxer and how that's all up in the air with, who's actually signed to Boxer and whatnot. That might have something to do with it. But like you said, he's popular enough to have, maybe if he wanted to move up in weight, fine, but he was popular enough to dip his waters in the weight division rather than go in against Willie Hutchinson, who's a great boxer, crafty, a lot of experience, and is naturally the bigger man. So it was a shock that they were fighting, and the way that he absolutely sort of annihilated him in a way, didn't he? And I don't know where Jeffers goes from there because they're two bad losses for him in terms of where he wanted to go in his career. That's just dropped him right back down to the bottom. And it don't make sense. I don't know what the matchmaking was there, whether it was, he's not going to get anywhere anyway. So Willie Hutchinson, we prefer him. We can get bigger fights with Willie. So we'll get him back on the up. I don't know whether that was the case. I don't get it because Jeffers was, like you said, he was in the shadow of Callum Simpson, but he was the one that he avoided. Callum Simpson didn't want to fight him, and all this talk that was going on at the time. So yeah, bit funny, and I feel for Mark, but I'd like to see him come back. I think he's still young enough to come back, but he's made the journey a hell of a lot harder by taking that fight. But fair play for taking it because Willie Hutchinson's a dangerous opponent for anyone really at 175.
Absolutely. And just before we further dissect the show from Saturday night, this is the point of the podcast where we're going to have to say goodbye to Josh. He's got other commitments. But Josh, I appreciate you coming back on the podcast. We hope this can be a permanent fixture. As always, good boxing knowledge, good input. But I appreciate your time today. And like I say, hopefully see you on next week's podcast.
Absolutely, boys. Sorry to have to leave early, but I have commitments away from boxing that I also have to attend to. So I'm going to love you and leave you, and I'm sure I'll be back next week as long as I'm not working. If I'm not working, I know where I'll be. I'll be on here talking boxing with you boys, and hopefully not having to flee from the scene before we're done. But anyway,
Good
much
man.
appreciated, boys. See you soon.
Nice meeting you. Take care, brother.
Yeah, so in terms of Willie Hutchinson, now this was something that I was going to bring up when we first broke the news of Ben Whittaker signing with Matchroom, and we can get into it now. Imagine a Ben Whittaker, Willie Hutchinson press conference. Never mind the fight, Jamie. Just imagine a press conference with Willie Hutchinson and Ben Whittaker. That you'd sell tickets for that alone.
Yeah, I'm all for. Yeah. I'm all for that. Willie's a boy. He's a boy, Willie. And I think they're both great characters. And I think that's where you'll be able to have Ben, where you can let Ben Whittaker express himself and have his moment on the microphone. And I think that's the perfect opportunity and the perfect opponent to have not just a dance battle in the ring with at this stage of his career, but a dance battle on the stage with the microphones, and have that back and forth, which could really, I think, them two having a fight and them two on a press conference would massively help Ben Whittaker's career.
We're
And I
gonna we're
think,
gonna plant the seed for this. We're gonna be the ones that are gonna claim this when it's made and
yeah,
when it does numbers on social media. We're gonna claim this here on the Let's Talk
yeah,
Boxing
I'm telling
podcast.
you, that could be a breakout moment for Ben Whittaker. I think he's good enough to beat Willie Hutchinson. So that's why when I'm saying it would be because Willie will give him give him the opportunity to entertain on the mic and grow his name because he'll just give it him back and they'll both go at it and then it'll become a bit of a they don't like each other, these two boys, they don't like each other. And then all eyes will be on it and then Ben, I think, will obviously win that fight, would win the fight if it happened, and it will really explode him onto another level. But it will still also allow whatever happens in the fight for Hutchinson to stay relevant in boxing as well.
Yeah, one thing that I am gonna say, and I mean this with all due respect to every light heavyweight in the division, it it kind of not amuses me, but when you see like people describe Ben Whittaker as a world champion in waiting, or Willie Hutchinson grabbing the mic and screaming for a world title fight in Scotland, and you kind of sit back and you think, do these guys know who the champions are in this division? You've got Artur Beterbiev has just lost to Bivol. He's in line for a trilogy fight there. You got Dimitri Bivol, who went 1-1 with Beterbiev. These two guys are elite. And you got David Benavidez, who's taking on Anthony Yard. The gap between the champions and the chasing pack. The chasing pack is some world-class fighters. You've got Callum Smith in there, Anthony Yard, as I say, Lyndon Arthur, Brad Ray fighting for the European title, Joshua Buatsi trying to get back into contention, Willie Hutchinson, Ben Whittaker. These are all great fighters, Gavodzic. There's other international lightweights that I'm doing a disrespect to not mentioning, but when we're talking Beterbiev and Bivol, number one and number two. Then you got David Benavidez, for me, a couple of rungs below them, a great world champion in his own right and a great fighter. The gap, to bridge to those guys is unbelievable. Maybe if we're talking about circling and fighting each other in the meantime, because Beterbiev probably has one more fight with Bivol and calls it a day. I think he might already have a fight penciled in the meantime, hasn't he? So he's going to be edging towards a Bivol trilogy fight. Whether it's this Stay Busy fight, what he's got coming up, then a Bivol trilogy fight. Dimitri Bivol, is he going to stick around too much after that trilogy fight with Beterbiev? Is the money going to be right for him? You never know. So maybe at that point we can start talking about Willie Hutchinson getting a couple of wins and into world title level. Ben Whittaker going up the levels. Callum Smith refinding himself and getting back into world title contention. Joshua Buatsi. But until Beterbiev or Bivol decide that they're done and Benavidez does what he needs to do, 175 pounds, it's going to be very tough for anybody to get near the top two and then even the number three for me.
Yeah, no, I'd have to agree. And but what's good for us and as British fight fans, British boxing fans, is you rattled off all them names there. They're all great names for us, and they can all fight each other, and they would all be entertaining. So I think you're right that they're just going to have to bide the time because it's the Bivol and Beterbiev division. It's where it will always be their division until both of them decide to leave. And then to throw in the mix, you got Benavidez, who arguably you could argue is, would have probably maybe a 50-50 fight with Bivol. I think he might probably beat Beterbiev at this stage of their careers. So then you've got him in the mix, and so I think it's going to be tough for all them to go and become world champions overnight because I think they're going to tie it up for at least the next 2 years. Regardless, the next 2 years is going to be them three names. Maybe Beterbiev, maybe not so much into the second of that year, but. Yeah, I just think that them British fighters, it's a good opportunity for them now while they're waiting around to put on some big shows. We're blessed to have so many big talents. And I think, yeah, we could have some really good light heavyweight nights ahead of us over the next few years. And I think they should all fight each other at this stage. There's not going to be any world title opportunities there. So get in there, have some great British dust ups because as our friend Crawler mentioned, all the Saudi cards, it's taking away some of the big British moments that are happening. Look, you've got all these British fighters that are in and around the same level that should all, but you've got stadium fights there,
Yeah.
up and down the country, arenas. So I think that should be the route, and I think it's a very exciting time to be a British boxing fan for the light heavyweight division.
Absolutely. Jamie, we could sit here all night and talk fantasy fights. It's one of our favourite things to do, but time constraints is a thing. We want to keep the Let's Talk Boxing podcast relevant. So I'm not going to bore the listeners with my views. We'll keep that for future podcasts. We've got the big light heavyweight show coming up in Manchester from Queensbury with some domestic fighters and that. So we look forward to that one. There's a million and one things we could discuss, but we're going to leave it there. We look forward to a big night in Sheffield. Is there anything you'd like to add before we finish, Jamie?
No, no, I think we've covered quite a lot, and we've even got some breaking news in there this time as well.
Absolutely, guys. I hope you jump back on board with the Let's Talk Boxing podcast. We will be recording every week between now and the end of the year. There's some huge fight nights coming up. We are going to jump 2 feet first back into the game, back into interviews. Keep an eye out on the Simbox YouTube channel for some interviews coming up this week with some cracking names. It's been the Let's Talk Boxing podcast. I'd like to close out again with wishing the Hatton family the very best with Ricky's funeral this weekend after his sad passing. Our thoughts, our prayers go out to Ricky Hatton, his family, his friends at this difficult time. Thanks for listening to the Let's Talk Boxing podcast, and I will see you next week.